So, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the third session of Beyond Belief. I'm Madhujit Singh, your host today. I run an organization called Ananya Women at Work, and we are into diversity and inclusion consulting. So, as a part of our initiative called Beyond Belief, we are in conversations with people, with men and women who are like us, and somebody who shares, and each one of us have reached where we are, going beyond some of our beliefs, not only our own beliefs, but our beliefs of people around us. So today, I'm very, very glad that Suparna Kapoor has joined us. Suparna is the DGM at HAL Academy in Bangalore. So before I talk a little more about Suparna, let me introduce to our co-host, Kirtika. Kirtika would be taking us, Kirtika is a visual designer, and she would be taking all the questions that will be coming through. So
I'll be helping in supporting this entire Zoom session with your doubts and everything. If you want me to moderate with your questions, I'll be more than glad to. Or else we can even line it up for the end. Hi everybody, I'm just looking forward to have an interactive session.
Thank you, Kirtika. So about Suparna Kapoor, Suparna is the DGM HAL Management Academy. She's an L&D specialist, trainer, facilitator, and a happiness coach. She has a professional experience of 27 years of demonstrated competency in learning and development and project management of engineering and technology projects in aerospace and telecom. Both, as you must be aware, aerospace and telecom are not fields where there are a lot of women. We find a lot of women. So she did her BTech in electronics and communication from IIT BHU, MBA in operations, symbiosis, certified PMP, CPTD, happiness coach, specialization in positive psychology from UPenn, and Marshall Goldsmith's personal leadership and success, leadership development program at IIS, Toulouse, and HR program at XLRI. She's completed online, offline training programs and courses in the area of emotional intelligence, theater, storytelling, NLP, behavioral economics, and more. During the last 8 years in L&D, accumulated experience in design and delivery of learning programs, creating and managing learning systems, and processes and organization development. Her areas of expertise in training include project and risk management, decision-making, women leadership, emotional intelligence, happiness and well-being. She's passionate about life and learning, loves reading books, traveling. She's a foodie at heart, interested in mind-body healing techniques, spirituality, anything and everything that helps me grow to make difference to myself and others. She's an IMA award winner, speaker and panelist at national level L&D conferences and Women Leadership Summit. So Suparna, I think I'll just pause over here because there's so much more that we can add about you, and I'm sure everybody's waiting to hear from you. So
thanks, Madhujit. I think that itself is a very long one.
So Suparna, let me start that. I mean, your bio did say that you're from BHU, IIT BHU, and that too in electronics and communication. So during those times, first of all, not very many women used to take engineering. Very, very professional women would become a doctor. So engineering, you took up engineering. You got into IIT, which is again not a very women friendly, or at that time specifically not a very women friendly place. Then you also had, you took up electronics and communication, moved out of your hometown comfort zone to go into another city, stay there when we didn't have the flights and trains were not so convenient as we are today. So tell us a little more about that journey, because a whole lot of beliefs you must have gone ahead of yourself to join there. So would you like to share that?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks Madhujit for this amazing initiative and making me part of this. I'm really glad to be here and seeing such many people here. And as for my journey, yes, I think that was kind of a turning point for me in my life, because when you go out into the big bad world, as we were trained in those days to believe that it's a big bad world out there. So when you go out in that big bad world, then there are a lot of ups and downs that one comes through. And as you very rightly said, we were very few women actually in those times. And I'm talking of, this was in 88, that's like ages ago. Maybe some people here wouldn't have been born also at that point of time. Yeah. So yeah, it was a long time ago. And I remember that in a batch of around 400, we were just 10 women. So it was interesting in some ways because we used to get a lot of attention, but yes, it was a difficult time too. Yeah, and they were actually.
If I may interrupt there, earlier in one conversation, you said that you felt it was a stroke of luck there. Getting into IIT BHU was a stroke of luck for you. So tell us more about it. I mean, it was a dream come true for many, but you call it a stroke of luck.
Yeah, it's not stroke of luck as much as I thought it happened by mistake. So even though clearing IIT was and still is considered to be a pretty big thing, I always felt that this happened to me by mistake. And when I joined also, for a long time I used to kind of hide myself. People should not know that I'm not that good, but somehow I did get here. I don't know how I got here. And there was a lot of that making yourself small kind of a thing. I mean, I don't know now when I read about it, I know it is called the imposter syndrome, but that time I didn't knew what it was. So yeah, I did feel like an imposter at some point of time, because when I saw people there, some of them were from very big cities, from fancy schools, and talking like nerds, and I thought, what is this happening? Like this is not me. Like I think I'm here by mistake. So yeah, that was a big thing. But yeah, but still we did carry on, and there were times when I look back and I think I do think if that belief wouldn't have been there within me, probably my journey would have been little more different, because I did close myself to a lot of opportunities, lot of experiences that would have come my way otherwise, because I always felt if I go too much in limelight, then people will actually know who I am, and I'm not one of these. Yeah, I'm not. I mean, so let me be a little behind, and upper story and everything will be fine, kind of a thing. Though I did pretty okay in college. It's not that I did fared badly, but yeah. And also, I think somewhere along the way, I realized also that core engineering is definitely not my passion. I completed engineering, but core engineering is not my passion, is also something I realized. But again, as we say, no, there is a belief that whatever you start, you need to finish it, right? So I did finish it. Though somewhere along the way, I knew, okay, it's probably not what I would want to do.
So you did talk about imposter syndrome, and there is enough literature available out there that specifically impacts specifically women, that we feel we don't belong here. And in the process, the kind of career choices we make, kind of even in organization, the kind of assignments we take up, we kind of make ourselves small. We try to make ourselves invisible rather than making ourselves visible to others, that this is the work that I'm doing. So that's so true, and it must have impacted your choices of career as well in that sense.
That's true, because I remember when placements were happening, I just took the first one that came.
Okay.
So I thought, yaar, iske baad kuch mila nahi to kya hoga? I don't think was a very wise choice to do, because there were n number of people on the scale there who were on either side of scale from me. So it was not that I was the only one like that, but yes, there were certain choices I made, certain decisions that I made that were coming from a fact of let me not take too many risks. Let me not show myself too much. And in fact, now that we have a WhatsApp group of our college people, so one of the days somebody was talking and somebody was saying, "Arey, we studied that subject from your notebook." And I said, "My notebook? How did people even study from my notebook? I never thought I was good enough that somebody could study from my notebook." So I mean, it was a kind of revelation that it was probably the way I saw myself. It's not the way people saw me. It was totally my view of myself, whereas that's not how people saw me, and that's not how people see me also. That I carried it for a very, very long time, actually. Yeah, that's true. And so in my career choices, in the positions that I took, there was a lot of this, let me not be in the limelight. Let me not open my mouth too much. It was a little later in my career, maybe 5-7 years, when I really found some mentors who actually brought out the best of me. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would also like to share here my own personal experience when I was in the 9th and the 10th grade. We had to, we were doing some presentation, and I volunteered to do it. I did my study. I, collected data, good content. And when I delivered, I had a stage fright. Despite that, I went there and delivered. So as it is, I come from a background that I'm not good at stage. And after the speech, this guy who was a bully in school, definitely, when I reflect back, I know he's a bully. So he came and told me that, your content is good, but maybe somebody else should have spoken instead of you. And that just one statement made me believe for so many years that I shouldn't go on the stage. So how we allow these kind of beliefs to impact the entire career that we choose.
Absolutely. I can totally understand that. And these are probably beliefs that many of them we are aware, and so many of them we are not even aware of. I mean,
that's right. Yes.
So they do exist, and they kind of lead us in a particular direction. And only when we become a little aware of ourselves, we realize where are we operating from.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is a wake-up call for any one of us whenever it happens in our lives.
So thank you for sharing that. Now we'll come to Hyderabad, and you were fantastic. I mean, we met in Hyderabad, yes. And you were going through a fabulous career over here. You were doing well here, and suddenly you realize that your husband's got a job in Bangalore. So you decided to join him in Bangalore, and for that you had to move into another department, starting afresh. Now, knowing you, what is, you are a perfectionist by nature. Now, you had to start a career again in L&D or in the academy. So how was that? How difficult or how easy was it for you to shift from a technical field to L&D field?
Yeah, so I think all along my career, I don't know whether it was a conscious or again it was, I'm sure it was emanating from one or other belief that I moved whenever my husband moved places. So we moved from Delhi to Bangalore, we moved from Bangalore to Hyderabad, and then back to Bangalore. So these are the kind of moves that happened, and most of the time it happened with me that whenever I was in a point in my career where I was about to reap some benefits of the hard work that I have been done, I am actually moving.
Okay.
So I think this was also one of those points, and I was quite happy with the way things were in Hyderabad in terms of my career, in terms of my social circle, you know it well, and in terms of what Anmol was getting. Anmol's my son, so what he was getting out there, the kind of environment that he was getting out there. And it was a difficult choice. I mean, but I did make that choice, and when I did that, there was this gut feeling that said that probably L&D is a place I would like to move. It was a very feeble voice, but I don't know, it is probably one of those rare moments when you listen to some of those voices inside of yourself. And I did take that leap of faith. It was a leap of faith for me.
Mm-hmm.
And all these years, I was more actually absolutely into technical areas, and I knew nothing about L&D, actually, nothing. I mean, I can say it was almost equivalent to zero. And as you said, I also had a lot of stage fright and fear of limelight and all of those things. And still, I took that choice. But obviously, the prime reason was that my husband was moving, and that opportunity existed for me in Bangalore. And my company offered to put me in that particular situation, which in fact was very nice. So it happened by default. But yes, I had to actually start from zero, which is very difficult for somebody who thinks they know a lot. That's me. Was me.
Not only know a lot, but perfectionist. I should know before I start something is what I remember of you.
Correct. So I should know everything before I start something. And when I went to this place, I knew nothing. I absolutely knew nothing, and I had to start from zero, which is very difficult as a belief to take. How do you actually start from zero when you carry your past baggage so much? No, you come from a good institute, you think you've read a lot, you know a lot, and then you are told start from zero. But I'm glad I took that, I broke that belief that you actually don't need to know everything to start a new thing. That was a big break for me because I had to actually learn on the job. I had to really, and I had to learn in many different ways. Yes, my organization provided me a lot of opportunities. I mean, for that, I will always be grateful. I had some great teachers also. But I had to learn in multiple ways, by seeing others, by shadowing others, sometimes doing things which probably I feel, no, this is too below me kind of a thing. But I learned in multiple kinds of ways, which itself is like breaking something in your head, breaking one of those neural connections in your brain which is stopping you from saying, no, you are not supposed to do this. This is not what you are meant to do, kind of a thing. So yeah, that was really a big learning, and I did have my ups and downs. There were challenges in between, but like शाहरुख खान की मूवी में कहते हैं ना कि जब किसी भी चीज को शिद्दत से चाहो तो सारी कायनात आपको उससे मिलाने की कोशिश करती है. So I think everything fell into place. Everything fell into place. I found a good support system. I found people who were willing to be ready to teach me. I found opportunities. I found training programs. I found people like you and many more who helped me guide through the intricacies of training and facilitation and L&D and all of that. So yes, it was a big thing because I always believe कि opportunity तभी लो जब when you are ready for it. And I was not ready, but one thing was, I think I took a lot of opportunities. I took even with half preparation. I know there was this program that was happening in one of our divisions in Lucknow, and the trainer, suddenly something happened in her family, and last moment she said, I'm not going. I was very new to this. And I suddenly jumped up and said, no, I'll go and do the program. And it took me a lot of effort, but yes, that was something I wouldn't have done probably a couple of years ago. Because I would have told myself, no, you are not ready for this.
And even data says that a lot of women apply for opportunities if they are able to tick at 90% of the requirement for the job, whereas men would go 50%. They're okay, right? I mean, the joke says that every guy in the United States already eligible to become the president of the United States. Their hands up. Yes, I can become.
Yeah, that's true. There are a lot of
so that's
things we do for ourselves. Yeah, I agree.
And I mean, all this while you are saying that you moved with your husband wherever he went, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Delhi, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Bangalore, and now you're alone. Your son is in the US, your husband is in Bombay. This time, Mumbai rather. So this time, didn't you feel the need to join him, or what are the beliefs there now?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting story because I think it was almost 4.5 years back that he said, this job is not taking me anywhere and I would like to shift. And I remember, and I don't know where I got that courage from, but I think somewhere before that, so I told him, wherever you go, whether you be in India, you go abroad, wherever you go, I will not stop you, because that's your career choice and I would definitely not want to stop you, but I am not going with you. It was very categorically, I told, I am not going with you. You go wherever, anywhere in the world. I'm perfectly all right with it. But I am not going because I love what I am doing. I love this city. Finally, I have managed to create some space, some identity for myself within the company, outside, having some social circle, being part of certain groups. And I'm not going along with you when you yourself anyway are very busy with your job, and after a couple of years, you will again say, I'm moving somewhere else. So I'm very happy, and I made this very conscious choice that I'm not going with you. And I think just probably maybe if I take a step back, I realize somewhere along the way, maybe a year or two before, I did break a belief that I used to think for a very long time that between a husband and wife, especially when they're equals in so many ways in terms of their education, in terms of the kind of work they do, only one of them can be successful.
Mm-hmm.
The other has to take a step back to manage things, whether it is in family or whatever it is. So if one goes up, the other has to hold the fort back. There was a belief that I held very, very strongly. And believe me, it's not something that my husband has ever told me. It's not something my parents have ever told me, but it exists. It existed for a very long time. Because
we learn it from the environment, because we are told as women, that so happily we have to sacrifice ourselves for the family and sacrifice ourselves to our husband's career and sacrifice ourselves to our kids' education. We kind of take these messages from our environment.
Yeah.
And we kind of feel proud of it that we've done it for.
Yeah, we all enjoy that status of being put on a pedestal, that, oh, she sacrificed so much kind of a thing.
Yes.
Many times we do. But for me, it was not so much from sacrifice, but a choice. But that choice was actually coming from a very faulty belief.
Okay. Oh, that's a very interesting thing. Faulty belief. So the choice you are choosing, nobody's asking you to choose, but the belief is something else, faulty belief. I like that, yes.
Yeah, so it was coming from a very faulty belief that only one can be. So they were choices I made. I chose to be with him. I chose to be, but that choice, because I never looked at I'm sure Omna is listening to this. I never looked at the and operator. Husband and wife both can be successful. It was either the husband or the wife. And in this case, probably the social programming was, okay, the husband, because he earns more than me, so let him be the one who goes up. Let me stay where I am. Kind of a thing, or let me move at my own pace. I won't say stay, because I was always, I'm not saying it with pride, but I was always good at wherever I was. So that was never a problem. But yeah, I moved at my own pace. So if I had to take a back seat, if I had to take leaves, if I had to put my career on hold because we had to move, so it was fine. It was a choice, but it was coming from a very wrong belief actually. And the moment I shifted that, automatically a lot of things changed in my life. Suddenly he was not traveling as much as I was traveling.
Okay.
Things started falling into place. So automatically, and he's not a person who's ever stopped me. He gives me a lot of freedom and a lot of space to be actually who I am. He believes that women need to be independent. That's been there with him for a while. He actually taught me driving. So in that way, he's a very, what should I say, person who allows that freedom and independence. But even though he didn't stop me, it was me who was stopping me. So I always think in my life, there is actually nobody who stopped me but me. And that is what has changed now, probably.
That's so interesting. So just taking a pause. Kirtika, any questions, anyone's?
Not yet, ma'am, not yet.
All right. Okay. So please, anybody who wants any question, you may write in the chat box, or we are also, all those on Facebook can also write it there. So Supama, coming back to what you said earlier, when you came to Hyderabad, you used the word, a lot of mentors were there. And would you like to share more about them, that, how did they help you in your career journey?
Yeah, so one of the mentors that I had in my previous organization while I was in Delhi, he retired from the forces and then joined our organization. So I think he was the first person who saw something in me which I was not able to see even in myself. And he actually, I would say, groomed me in many, many ways.
Okay.
And he actually had, I remember almost more than 15 years ago, he told me that you are going to be an amazing trainer. He said, what the hell? How is that even possible? I don't even know how to speak. I've never gone on stage. What are you even talking? So when now I go back to him, he said, see, I told you that such a long time ago. What I'm trying to say, he actually saw things in me which I didn't see in myself. And he really boosted my confidence. His name is Colonel Gyan Kumar. He retired from the forces. And I think from 1998 onwards, we've known each other. We're still in touch. After that, we became friends. In fact, he taught me, because he was from the forces, he taught me a lot of finer things about how you eat, how you dress, how you know, some of those very fine things which probably I wouldn't have learned otherwise. The way you carry yourself. There were a lot of things that I learned from. So he was an amazing influence on me in the corporate world. And obviously in Hyderabad, that Omna in our group, which also surprisingly is called Ananya, has been my lifeline all along. So Omna, I am here wherever I am, it wouldn't have been possible without you. So thank you so much for that. And yes, so that's one group and one person I think I'll be indebted for a long time, because wherever that I am, whatever that I have learned, whatever joys and sorrows that exist, that one group that gives me unconditional support, non-judgmental space to be actually who I am. I actually learned what is non-judgment, and how freeing it is to be in a space when nobody's actually judging you, from Omna and the group. So yeah, they've been a great influence in my life. And then obviously my parents, my sister's been a great support for me all along. My family members, my in-laws. I mean, that way a lot of friends and family. And right now, I think my biggest teacher is my son. He's teaching me some amazing things, actually. Yeah, so it's been very interesting. Yes.
So even I mean, that's a sentiment even I can share with you. A lot of learning that what I am today is thanks to Omna. So a lot of beliefs that I'm out of right now is thanks to Omna that I'm here.
Yeah.
Thank you, both of you.
So Omna always tells, question your beliefs and change your definitions. So there's so many definitions in my life that I have changed. How should a marriage be? How should a career be? How should you be? How should your relationship with your family be? And I think probably this is one thing that I've learned, that question everything. It's not, you don't need to accept everything that is coming your way. And that is, I think, the shift from the autopilot to the choice, because otherwise that we live in such a programmed space all the time without really even thinking what we are doing. So I think that is something that I've learned very recently, I would say.
So I'd like to touch a little bit upon, again, the mentor that you mentioned in your early career. Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot his name. Colonel?
Gyan Kumar.
Gyan Kumar. So Colonel Gyan Kumar, you said he taught you how to, how to eat, how to dress, certain things which are sometimes very personal. And coming from a man to a woman, sometimes it's even uncomfortable. So how did you deal with that?
Yeah.
Of course, at that time, if he was already a colonel and you were, starting out, then probably the age gap was so much that he was like a father figure, or the age gap was almost like your father. But how did you deal with that? Were there any discomforts or?
Yeah, so he was, I never saw him as a father, though, age-wise, definitely he was more there, but I never saw him as a father. He was a boss in many ways, but yes, but I don't know, surprisingly, there was a sense of comfort that existed between us, and I understood that his intent was right, because I think women have this inherent ability to sense the intent of people. You know what is appropriate and what is inappropriate.
True.
I think that was something, and after a point, I think he kind of took it upon, I felt that he took it upon himself, that he had to show something to me that I was not able to see in myself. So that what you say, that polishing happened in many different ways. We traveled, because there was some travel that happened with work. There were meetings and army parties that we could go, and it was something that I learned observing him, as not as much as he taught me those things.
Okay.
Observing the way he carries, the way he puts his fork and knife and stuff and all that. So I kind of learned a lot of things that way. Yeah.
Yeah, so a very interesting thing, because being in the work that I am, helping, supporting organizations with their women leadership. So a lot of women come and ask me, how does a mentor look like? And I tell them, they wear a white robe and they have a halo on the top. You just see them and you know them. So when you say that you observe, I've got a lot of mentors who don't even know that I exist in this world. So I observe and I ask questions. Sometimes there are mentors whom who I know and I have a friendly relations. So I observe that. And the other thing is that I learn I have a whole lot of designated mentors who are younger to me. Today, being in the space that we are, we are obsolete in terms of digital media. We are nowhere close to what these digital natives are. We are all digital immigrants. So a lot of mentors are so much younger to me. So your son is there, my son is in, we mentor each other. Then I have the first speaker Sita, I consider my mentor. So I have some strategy issues. She's so much younger to me, but I go to her when I have some strategy things. So mentors are like all around. We just have to seek them out.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I don't think age has got anything to do with that. And probably now I also think I've probably reached a space where I think from every interaction that I have with somebody, what is it that I can take away? They may not be willing to, they may not be intentionally offering it to me, but can I take something away from each of the interaction, session, training program, conversation that I'm part of? So I think that is something that probably with time we kind of learn that it is not necessary that I need to take everything from every person and that person has to be my role model kind of a thing.
Yeah.
From each person we can pick certain things what makes sense to us. So if you ask me a question, who's your role model, I genuinely don't have a role model, because in every person that I meet, what is it that I can learn from that person at an individual level? And we are all unique in our own ways. We all have something to offer to the world.
So, yes, your last statement is even more powerful. We are all unique in our ways and we have so much to offer. So a lot of younger women would be looking up to you right now. I mean, I say women, but then younger men and women would be looking up to you, where you come from and where you've reached. So what is one thing that, if you were to say about your life learning, I know lots of learnings there, but one life learning which you would like to share with them, to the younger generation?
First of all, you're reminding me of my age by saying younger, so that's not really nice.
Yeah, okay, so should I
anyway,
put Anmol there? Okay, somebody from Anmol's group, let's say that.
No, just joking, yeah. But I think one of the things that I probably would think that I've learned is that in any given situation that I am, one of the beliefs that I'm trying to hold, I mean, I do falter at times, is that in any given situation, I'm doing the best that I can do. With the knowledge, with the awareness that I have right now, I'm doing the best that I can do. I don't need to compare myself with anybody. I don't need to have a model of perfectionism that I hold, but in every situation, I'm doing the best, and I also allow myself to make mistakes. Making mistakes is also fine, which is again a very difficult space because we are so critical of our own self all the time. Am I the only thing that I ask myself continuously is, am I learning from those mistakes, and am I keeping my journey on? Yes, there will be certain times when I think I could have done better, but that's fine. In the given situation, in the given moment, that's the best I could do, and that is fine too. So I think
making mistakes is important, yes.
Making mistakes is important. And probably another one thing that I would like to say is that I don't need approval from the significant people in my life all the time. I don't need that approval at all. If they agree with me, fine. If they don't agree with me, that's fine too, because I think something more is important for me. And that is also okay. So, and the only person I need approval from is my own self, which many times is what we take away from ourselves. So can I be my own biggest ally, my own biggest mentor, my own biggest supporter? I think that's a message that I would like to give.
I love that statement. Can I be my own ally, my own mentor, my own biggest support? So I think one of the questions I actually wanted to ask you was that who has been your biggest supporter? So now I will not ask you that. You already answer. Okay, so now going back to your college days, I mean, while you've said all this, but going back to your college days, imagine Suparna has just got into college and just reached the college. What is one advice you would give the young Suparna today?
I think it will be more than advice. It will be one line. I think you are awesome, you are whole, you are complete. I think that's all I'm going to say to her.
You're awesome. So can I borrow these lines maybe for some of my programs? You won't ask me a patent.
Welcome. I have also borrowed from somebody, so go ahead and do that.
You're awesome. You're complete.
I'm awesome. I'm whole. I am complete. Just enjoy the ride. I think that's what I'm going to tell her.
Yeah, so that's wonderful. So, Kitika, any questions so far?
Not yet, ma'am. I can't see anything coming up. So I
Anyone,
think that,
please?
yeah, if anybody is interested in asking any questions, you can just unmute yourself and ask, or you can just type it out. I can read it out for you.
So anyone?
Yes, Parvati.
Hi, Suparna.
Hi, Parvati.
Will you touch upon the happiness coach bit, which I heard in your bio?
Okay, so I think it was maybe probably around 5-6 years back that I did a course on happiness through Coursera, and that's when I got hooked to this whole concept of positive psychology. And I've been delving deep into this. But this happiness coach thing happened in lockdown. I think lockdown was a period where we were really struggling with a lot of things, and then suddenly this thing popped up that this program is available. I had always wanted to do it, but since it was physical, it never happened for me. So that was something I did. But so when people ask me, you are a happiness coach, they expect that probably all the time I'm always happy. That's not what happiness coach is actually. A happiness coach is a person who is like any other normal human being. I go through my ups and downs, but I also understand that the source of happiness lies within me. And if there is something that is disturbing, I always have to go inside to change the outside. I think that is something that I have learned, and that is what I see. And if I can invite people and offer the same thing to people, that gives me happiness actually, yes.
So what do you do when you invite others? When somebody comes to you, so what do you do? What is the approach there, if I may ask? Parvati, if I can intervene there, or would you like to continue the question? So yeah. I come to you and I want to be coached. So is there something that you...
Formula or...
Yeah, so there is a framework that is made available to us, like any other coaching program. So happiness coaching is another form of coaching, but and again, it's a self-discovery process. There is no formula that I can put it in a glass and give to you and you will become happy. It's again a process of self-discovery, and like any other coach, you lead the person through that process to understand where is all the discontent or the feeling of dis-ease coming to them from. So it's again like any other coaching process. Yeah.
Parvati, does that answer, or do you want to ask more?
No, that's it. I was a little kind of listening to Suparna talking about how she was always in a state of self-doubt for a long, long time. And then what struck me in the bio, amongst the whole lot of beautiful stuff which Madhu was reading out, was the happiness coach bit. That's why I was trying to correlate the two. Whether something triggered and made you get into it was what I was trying to find out.
Yeah, so I think for many years there has always been that trigger in me that since I always thought I was incomplete, I had to keep doing something to get to that state of completion, right? So that way I've done n number of things in my life, because I always felt here, I'm not, there's still something left, no? There's still something more. So, but the happiness coach does not come out of it. I'm genuinely passionate about this subject. So yeah. But yes, a lot of my learning has happened from that space. I agree, and thanks for pointing that out to me again.
Thank you, Suparna. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else?
I think I have a question for Suparna.
And Ruchira also wants to ask something.
Okay, first I'll let Ruchira ask. I'll go last.
That's my sister.
Oh.
Ruchira, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, thanks for giving me the chance to speak. Yeah, just a single question, very layman type of question I would like to ask. You said you've changed your faulty beliefs, right? But the n number of people who are around you, especially at your workplace, who are still running with these faulty beliefs, how do you actually challenge or manage them? I would be happy to hear about that.
Yeah, so as usual, she asked me very difficult questions. Right?
The simple question.
I know.
Disguised as a
The
simple
younger one always challenged the older one, right?
It's always good to fight.
Yeah, yeah. But the point is that, I mean, that's probably, there was a time, I think, I wouldn't say very far off, where I used to challenge everybody all the time. Why are you saying this? This is not right. And I still speak out a lot when I feel there is something not appropriate happening around me, or people are operating from something which is not fair or just or equitable. I mean, those are my trigger points most of the time. But after a point now, I think I've also learned to let it go, in the sense that they will learn when they will learn. I can only point it out to them. And I keep operating from my belief that one of the things, and this is slightly from the energy perspective, they say the person holding the highest energy has the ability to pull others up. So rather than being pulled down and sucked down into the other's belief system, can I still stay with mine, so that probably the others might come up? I have no guarantees. I have no formula to change them. I can only hope, and I can probably show them glimpses what will happen if they change. That's all I can do. And that's all I do.
So you don't, you just cannot definitely enforce it, and you have to run with two belief systems at one point of time, yours as well as others.
So the point is that, can my belief be fluid? Can I have fluid beliefs? Because the moment I say this is my belief and I hold on to it, I actually don't know whether it is right or wrong. It's again my belief, right? It's right for me. Same, your belief is right for you. How do I know that what is actually right and actually wrong? So getting to that space where you can say there's nothing right, nothing wrong. In this moment, I believe this and I feel this is the most appropriate thing. The other person believes them. I operate by my system. Let them be where they are. Probably tomorrow, who knows, I might change too. I don't know. So I think, I don't know whether I've answered you. Yeah, but
yeah, definitely. Yeah. Thanks for that. Next time we can talk it over.
yes, we will do that.
So we have a question from Usha. Usha, would you like to unmute yourself and ask the question, or do you want me to do it for you? Okay, I think that I'll read out her question. If Suparna can say something of drama therapy, if I'm right, I got this from the introduction to her.
Yeah, so it's not as much as drama therapy. I'm not into using drama as a therapeutic tool, but I do use drama as a tool in my training and facilitating sessions. I have attended a couple of workshops. I'm also associated with a theater group. So I use them more as a tool to be able to bring certain, because what happens in a very formal session, people don't open up. So I'm sure Parvati can really understand what I'm saying, that we, as facilitators, I use drama and theater and body movement and some of those things as more as a tool to be able to bring certain things out of people, and also loosen the environment, because sometimes corporate workshops are very stiff and all of those things. So to bring a certain lightness, because when people are lighter, they open up more. There are more chances that they open up and they share and they actually let certain things out. So that's how I don't use it for therapy. I mean, if my bio read that, I think I'll have to go back and see that again, but I don't use it. I'm not trained on that. I have some experience, some learning using theater. So that's all I have.
Okay, ma'am. Yeah, I got it.
Thanks.
I guess that those are the
questions. Your question.
Yes, now I'll go. So, Suparna, my first question is that I heard you say that there was a lot of, let's say, doubt from you. Is this what you wanted to do, or is this what you're right to do? And a lot of questions throughout your career. My first question is that, was there a switch that happened that immediately you felt that, okay, now this is what I am supposed to be doing? Or was it a long process that we sort of get matured to understand that, you know, whatever we do it to the fullest. And as you rightly mentioned, that you feel whole and complete by doing something, by discovering things within you. Because I was able to relate it because I had multiple career choices. I kept going from one to one and felt the same, and I still feel so. Today I feel it's a process. So I just wanted to hear from you. And the second small part of the question is that, is there anything more you feel that you're you wanting to do, or something that I'm yet to complete, like you know, climbing Mount Everest or something? It could be as simple as that. But is there something that you still would like to complete?
Yeah, so I think I'll answer the first one, the later question first. That's the easier one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
So yeah, I mean, as anybody else, I do have my bucket list. And in fact, when the pandemic happened and so much scare was happening, I thought, oh my God, I can't die here. I haven't lived my life at all. There's still so many things to do. So this can't happen. So I'm gonna live through this, because yes, there are a lot of things. And one of those things, I think probably, which was on my, like you were telling, on my 2020 list, was the Chadar trek in Ladakh. That was something I wanted to do in January, February. It didn't happen. And the other thing that is very high is a trip to Turkey, solo trip to Turkey. So that is definitely big on my agenda. Let's see when that happens. But yes, like anybody else, I have my whole big bucket and trunk and I don't know what kinds of lists.
Nice,
So
lovely.
that's there. And as about the career, I think each one of us goes through our own journey. And I don't think any journeys can be similar to somebody else's journey. So I think it's a process where the moment we keep discovering ourselves, that we also keep discovering the careers that we would like to be part of, or even the organizations we would like to be part of. I think many times it's not so much as a career, but the kind of organization that we would like to be part of. I think that also becomes very significant. You want to be part of certain kind of people you want to have around who add value to you. So I think this is a discovering process. And for me, the shift from the functional to L&D happened on a gut feel. It really was something. They say gut, yeah, but I mean, if I think logically, there's nothing like gut decision making. But yes, it was more a leap of faith. But I think I've been managed to be reasonably successful there, because as I was going through the journey, there was a lot of internal journey that I was taking. I think if we have not taken that journey ourselves, that means if we've not discovered layers in ourselves, it is very difficult to support people in discovering those parts of themselves.
Absolutely, yes. The inner journey is the one that you know, I could sense it while you were explaining that over the period of time when we start going into the inner side of the journey, that's when we truly discover the completeness of the wholesome of life itself.
Absolutely. And if I have to just share knowledge and information, why would somebody come to me? Google is there better than me, right? But there's something more that I add, and that something more comes when I have lived through certain experiences in my life. And I'm also willing to accept that, okay, I made certain mistakes and I'm still in a learning process, which for a person like me is very difficult. I'm actually learning to tell myself, I don't know. Come and ask me, and I'm willing to say I don't know, because I genuinely don't know a lot of things.
Nice.
In fact, Suparna, that reminds me of one quote which says that a bird sits on a branch, not with the confidence that the branch is fine, but with the confidence that she can fly, the bird can fly. So that she has confidence on her own wings than the branch itself.
Yeah, that's true. I agree.
Thank you so much, Suparna. That answered my question. And we have one more question from Madhavi. Madhavi, would you like to unmute and ask yourself, or do I do it for you? Okay, I think that I'll go ahead. How does one overcome this feeling of inadequacy or not good enough for the job? That's Madhavi's question to Suparna.
Yeah, so So whenever we think that we are not good or we are inadequate, we are comparing ourselves with somebody else. Because there's a benchmark that we have kept, and that is the benchmark. So it's almost like a judgment. No, there's a rule book that exists that says, okay, if you don't meet this, you are not good enough. If you don't meet this, you are not good enough. So can we actually let go of those rule books that exist in our own heads? And these rule books come from social programming, from education, from lot of those things that they come from. So can we, and it's again a process. It's not that I think in my head that I drop everything, it will drop. It's a process. Can I start with dropping smaller things which are not that significant for me and say, okay, in this probably I will stop comparing myself with somebody. And the only comparison that probably I can have is to myself a day before, a month before, a year before. Have I become somebody better? Do I have goals for myself which are not goals which are triggered out of either comparison or jealousy or the need to be somewhere, or looking at somebody on Facebook and saying, oh, this person is having a fantastic life, why am I not there? Kind of my own personal individual goals that fulfill me. And once we are able to do that slowly, that comparison, and it's not something, it's not going to go away. Finally, we are all human beings. If I say I don't compare myself and I've never felt jealous, I probably would be looking like the Buddha that I have in my picture. But I'm not. I live in a real world with real people, with subordinates, with bosses, with colleagues, with spouse, children. There will be comparisons, there will be the ups and downs and the doubts. And it's okay to have those doubts, but it's not okay to keep operating all the time from those doubts. What is that doubt telling me is a question we can ask ourselves. And how can I look beyond that and see what is truly meaningful for me, rather than being programmed by what society wants out of me. I think that's probably the way I can understand. Anybody else, Madhuji, Omna, there are a lot of people here probably who could answer it better than me.
That was actually very wonderfully put. In fact, all I can add to what you said is just take that one step today, a small step. Think of, if there is a feeling of inadequacy, and if you sit down and see where is it coming from, as Suparna has explained so well, and just see what will it take for me to not feel inadequate. So take that one step. So there is a little bit of self-reflection, as Suparna said, inner journey that we need to do, and take that one small step today. What can I read today? What can I watch today? Who can I speak to today? So those one little things will actually accumulate to fill up the gap that you're feeling right now. So, I mean, don't have big goals over there that I will become like that. What can I do today is enough.
Yeah, that reminds me of Suparna's explanation for happiness coach, that she mentioned that happiness has to be within you. It has to come from you. Then, I could relate both the things for some reason. And
so Madhvi, does that answer your question, or anything you would like to add?
Can I add to that? Can I add?
Yeah.
Oh yes, most welcome. It's a conversation.
It's okay to feel not okay.
Absolutely.
I think that's something, that plus another thing, again, like Suparna said, I learned from my son too. He said, Amma, it's all right to be bored. It's all right. Allow me to be bored at times. So it's okay if you don't feel okay. Also, it's fine. I don't think we should be too harsh on ourselves.
Absolutely. And that's also probably one of the things that I'm learning, that it's okay to pause. It's fine. You can rest. You don't have to keep running after now this. And it's okay to pause and just be, which still is a challenge for a lot of us, especially as women. Many times we get into this drive of needing to prove ourselves constantly. It's okay if I don't really prove myself also, it's going to be fine. Yeah. I think the world is not going to be different.
Nice. So thank you, Suparna. There's one more question from Priya. Hi, Kirtika. My question is, there is a belief among women that men in higher position are not helping the women grow to take the seat at the table. What is your take on that?
Could you repeat it, Kirtika? I just lost you for a minute there.
Yeah, sure. there is a belief among women that women in higher position are not helping the women grow to take the seat at the table. What is your take on that?
That's a tough one. Yeah, because I personally think it has got nothing to do with women. It can happen with men also. I mean, in the sense that there are times when people in higher position help you. There are times when they don't. I think that's a very human and corporate thing that happens anywhere. So I think we don't need to take it personally. It's not happening to me because of me. That's how sometimes it happens in corporates. You sometimes get good seniors, sometimes you don't get such good ones. But I also think that, and I've also seen that some of my most amazing growth has happened when I've got a difficult boss or a person who's pushed my boundaries to the limit, and I had to find new ways of operating because that support didn't come so easily to me. So in some of those difficult situations, yes, we would all like to have supportive bosses, colleagues, but companies, human beings are like that. Like we are like that. I think we have to accept that folly of being human and being corporates in our own ways. So in every situation, what is the best I can do? Even if I'm being pushed to the corner, what can I learn? Can I grow? Can I stretch? I mean, for me, that has been my experience. I mean, it's not that always I've got, but from each of them, I've learned some amazing lessons, and lessons not only in terms of the work that I do, but personal lessons. How can I operate differently with a person who does not hold beliefs that are similar to me, who does not operate the way I would expect them to operate? How can I be different? It is difficult at times. At times, I do give up also. Okay, chodo. Okay, when they change, okay, probably I'll do something different. It happens. So yes, it will be good if we are able to offer support to each other. And that's why I always say women need to create their own support groups. And there's no better person to vouch for it than Madhuji, right? We need to create our own support groups, because when we reach a critical mass, that is when we can bring the change.
Yeah, and so many times I write to Suparna, I'm stuck in the L&D over here, could you help me on this? And she sends across the material, enough material. Probably I would have taken so much more time to do the same thing.
Yeah, that's how we are. No, we need to keep helping. I've learned so many things from you. So we need to have our own support groups, whether it is in the organization, whether it is outside, but we need to have our own support groups, people we can reach out to and seek support. And then there's nothing wrong in asking help. I think that's something that when we call ourselves as strong women, we resist from that. We don't ask for help at all.
And the question comes from Priya, who's always there to support me. She's always around with me. She's been supportive of my whole being in the field that I am right now.
Yes, so
if you're done, probably we'll have, let's have a quick picture of all of us. Let's put on our videos, and for once, let's have a quick picture. Or any other question coming in?
I think that's all.
We would want to see you. Hello, Priya. Priya is sitting right across the room over here. Yes, please. Come on, everyone. We want to see you.
Partner, I'd like to really thank you. This was amazing. I've known you for so long, but I didn't know so much about you. So thank you for inviting me to this, and I really enjoyed everything. Thank you, all of you.
Thanks. This is one more person I've learned a lot from. Yeah.
Thank you, Sajni, for joining.
Yeah.
No, I'm so glad I joined, and thank you so much. The whole thing went off so well.
Thanks, ma'am.
Thank you. So thanks, everyone. We have these sessions every alternate Saturday. In case you want to be part of it, please write to us, either Kirtika or me. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Madhuji. Thanks for
doing
this, and thanks everybody for joining in. It was amazing to have you all here.
And you know, have a good weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy. Without that, we don't say. And thank you, Ruchira, for wearing the mask and showing us the mask that you're wearing.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Suparna, for making our weekend start very energetic. And thanks a lot.
Thanks, Kirtika, for hosting this and keeping all the questions and the tech part. Great.
The mask is
pleasure,
actually the necessity of the day, and I'm at my workplace, so I need to carry.
She's a doctor and she's.
Thank you so much, Dr. Come on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Aparna, Dr.
Thank you.
Suparna, Madhujit Singh. Thank you so much.
Thank you.